Hey, scholars. So I know that you're going over your summaries for World War II in your online textbook, but I wanted to take some time to go over all the major events in World War II. So there are a few questions that I have for you here. Why did a global conflict happen so soon after World War I? And which events in World War II were the most significant? So in this lesson and presentation, I will go over all the major events and better help you understand the US's role in the war and the human cost of the war. So let's start with the causes. So I broke it down into a three-word acronym of WAR. So the W part of this is the World War One impact, the Treaty of Versailles. As you know, and as you read about last week, the Treaty of Versailles made Germany and Austria, which were the biggest losers of World War One, pay reparations. And they were very unhappy with that agreement in Paris because it made them give up their weapons, their military power and strength, and they economically suffered because they had to pay so much money back. All right. So Germany agreed to sign this treaty only after the victorious countries threatened to invade Germany. So to avoid the Allies from World War One from invading Germany, Germany signed it because they were threatened to. Also, Germany had been paying reparations for decades on up until 2010. So for almost 100 years, Germany was still paying from that one war. The second part of what caused World War II is the failure of appeasement. So A equals appeasement. Appeasement means just doing any and everything to avoid war, any and everything to please the other person so that there will be no conflict. Apparently, the Allies thought that by giving Hitler whatever he wanted meant that Hitler would never attack them. That did not work, failed. The last part of the causes of World War II is the rise of nationalism and dictatorships. So the R part is the rise of nationalism and dictatorships. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about nationalism and how the dangers of nationalism lead to these leaders that create cult-like personalities and really cause a lot of harm on their countries. So just take a look at who's fighting in World War II. So we have Axis and Allied powers. So those that are in red are the Allies. Our country, the US, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, which is now Russia, are the main, and France. We can't forget about France. They're the main parts of the Allied forces. The Axis forces, which are in blue, include Japan, Germany, and Italy. All right. These are the countries that are fighting against us. Also, let's take a look at the timeline for the major events during World War II. So most historians agree, and I mean, there are various years that they use, but most historians agree that 1939, the year that Hitler invaded Poland, was the year that started officially World War II. But there were other events that happened before he invaded Poland that also were affiliated with World War II, including the pact or the teaming up of Mussolini and Hitler prior to Hitler attacking or invading Poland. We also have other events like when Germany invaded Britain and launched their attacks in the air on London. We also have other parts of Europe like Austria that were invaded by Germany. Italy also declares war on France, which forces Britain to help France out. And then also we have this weird little agreement that Stalin, who's over Soviet Union and Russia, forms with Hitler. This non-aggression pact, which means, hey, we're the two biggest leaders or dictators, and we're going to partner up. But Hitler kind of breaks that with the Operation of Barbarossa, where he ends up attacking Russia anyway. And also, we have the attack of the Japanese on our naval ships in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which brought the U.S. into the war. All right. Everything after this includes the Allies trying to push Germany back. So we have the U.S. and Britain trying to beat the Axis powers in France and North Africa. We also have D-Day, which is the largest land, air, and sea battle in the world that happens in Normandy, France. It actually happens at 5 beaches in northern France, where all the Allies attack Germany to get them out of France. That was the goal of that. All right. And then, as you see, the war ended with us dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan because Japan refused to surrender. All right. Um, During this process, Hitler and his wife commit suicide, and the Soviets take over Berlin. There's a conference where a lot of the Axis powers are forced to surrender. Right. So I'll give also a description of this. So here's like a brief description of each major battle or event of World War II. Germany invades Poland. Italy joins the war. There's fighting in Greece and Northern Africa because Italy has colonies. And all the colonies that we talked about when the scramble for Africa happened, and all the colonies like India, which fought and helped the British, they're also fighting and supplying the Axis and Allied powers with food, weapons, and men. So we also have this air raid over London called the Blitz campaign that Germany uses to kind of scare Britain or to make them a part of Germany. But they also at the same time invade the Soviet Union that same year. And then again, we're brought into the war because Japan attacks us, right? Here is most of these events are toward the end of the war. So if you break it down, you take 1939 to 1941 as the first part of the war, which mostly was fought in Europe. The rest of the war is fought mainly in the Asian Pacific. All right. So think about the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway, Japan attacks, but they lose. The Battle of Stalingrad happens in Russia, where Germany kind of pushes further into Russia, but Russia does not give up. D-Day again happens in 44, and then after we attack and drop the bomb in 45, Japan surrenders and the war is over. One of the main events also that happened was the Holocaust. You got a chance to see a virtual online tour of a concentration camp a few days ago, and so during the Holocaust, there were a few things that happened in Germany where Hitler created this ideology against the Jews. So he forced schools to teach that Jews were evil. He kind of blamed Jews for all of Germany's problems, and made it known that he thought the Aryans were superior. He created posters. A lot of propaganda happened, movies, books. Anybody that disagreed or opposed Hitler was either executed or thrown in jail. He had all these big rallies to support his base, where he got people to go up against the Jews. And he also targeted Jews through taxes, where they lived. Their synagogues were burned down. The police, they were heavily policed. They couldn't move. They were curfews, all kinds of crazy things. Right. So the Holocaust total, about 6 million Jews were killed, but also those who were considered disabled, gypsies, people who were gay, those who were political enemies of Hitler also died in these concentration camps. I wanted to show you a map of D-Day, which connects to what we talked about earlier with the major events. Again, this was the Allies' best chance to kind of get Germany out of France and kind of get some type of victory in Europe, all right, which was very successful. But it took a lot of loss. When we get to the war in the Pacific, there was a lot of island hopping. So after Japan attacks us in Pearl Harbor, we end up, because we have colonies in the Asian Pacific, including the Philippines, having to defend its territory. Now, at the same time, China is on our side because they're having a civil war, but they unite against Japan and end up helping the Allies. So after we drop the bomb, this is an image. These are images to show what the cities looked like before and what happened after the bomb was dropped. Here's more images about just the effects and impact of the bomb. The first time a nuclear weapon was ever used in history. So after World War II, right, we know that those who were on the Axis side, including Germany, Italy, and Japan, lost. The United Nations was created to replace the League of Nations, which failed, and the United Nations still exists today to kind of help um, countries, with arms treaties and with health and all kinds of conflicts that happen and to keep peace. Um, there are two countries that emerged out of World War II as the most powerful, and that includes our country and Russia, or the Soviet Union. All right. So there's another war that will eventually continue. It won't be necessarily a physical war, but next week we're going to talk more about the Cold War and what happens for the next 45 years after World War II. If there are any questions about World War II, any of the events that were discussed, please let me know and talk to me. Again, I hope that you understand better what happened during World War II. Again, let me know if you have questions. Thank you.